Welcome. In this video, we will show how to use the OpenPages installer to perform a shared cell deployment. We will discuss the meaning of a shared cell deployment, prerequisites for shared cells, and the shared cell installation process. Beginning in version 7.4, the OpenPages installer now allows deployments into shared cells, or WebSphere cells that already exist and are being used for other applications. This differs from previous versions of OpenPages, where the installer always creates a new cell that can only be used for running OpenPages, which in 7.4 is referred to as a standalone deployment. We begin by exploring the Websphere Console for a cell and deployment manager that exist, but do not have OpenPages installed. In the topology of our cell, which we've called shared cell, we see that we currently have a deployment manager and one other node, which has a single application server running a sample application. We will be installing OpenPages using this cell by having the installer create a new node and deploying the OpenPages application into it. But first we need to make sure that we have configured global security on our cell. Here we see that global security has already been configured and is enabled on our cell. If global security is not currently enabled on your cell, you must enable it before OpenPages can be installed. Global security can be enabled by running the security configuration wizard, or by manually configuring the security settings, and then restarting the deployment manager. Now we move to the OpenPages installer. I've already logged in, so I'll select a previously existing deployment where I've already filled out all of the information. Here on the deployment page, there are a few important things to note for shared cell deployments. First, notice that the task I've selected is shared cell deployment. This is the task that should be selected when performing a fresh install of OpenPages into an existing cell. Now let's take a look at the deployment manager card. Most of the fields on this card function the same way they do in a standalone deployment. The difference, however, is in fields that contain details about the cell and deployment manager in WebSphere. In a standalone deployment, the installer will create the cell and deployment manager profiles with the values specified in the installer. But in a shared cell deployment, these profiles already exist, and so the values entered into the installer must match the settings for those profiles. We must enter the correct WebSphere admin username and password based on the cell's global security settings, deployment manager profile directory, SOAP port, and profile name, the cell name, and the deployment manager node name. If these fields are not filled out correctly, then the validation will fail. All other fields on this card and the other cards have the same behavior and requirements as they do in a standalone deployment. Once we have correctly filled out the fields on all of the cards, we can perform the validation. When the validation finishes, we can download the report. And we see here that the installer correctly determined that the deployment manager exists and the information we provided about it was correct, but that the OpenPages application still needs to be deployed. From here, we perform installation and configuration, just like in a standalone deployment. However, be aware that the deployment manager will be restarted multiple times during the OpenPages installation, and so any processes that rely on the deployment manager being active should be stopped before beginning the install. When you are ready, you may click the install button. Once we have finished all steps of the install, we can see that the installer has changed to the current deployment task. Now, if we look at our cell's topology, we can see that a node and application server have been added for OpenPages. Also, we can see that both our sample application and OpenPages are both running in the cell. This concludes our video. In this video, we have discussed the meaning of a shared cell deployment and the prerequisites for a shared cell, and we have covered the shared cell installation process. We hope you found this video helpful, and we invite you to follow along with some of our other videos.